You're cruising along in life. Good friends, solid family. You've just earned a nursing degree and landed your dream job as a surgical assistant. Your future is paved with opportunity. But on a trip to Vegas, you encounter a sociopath with a grievance against you and a plan to destroy you at any cost. And suddenly, the world you thought you knew is turned upside down. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and true crime author. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Two good friends we are going to call Autumn and Jasmine find themselves facing a rather troubling situation on December 7, 2023. It's near 3:30 p.m. They walk into the Las Vegas Police Department to report that their other friend, 23-year-old Marayna Rodgers, who lives in Washington State and has recently come into town, is missing. The last they heard from Marayna was the previous day, December 6th at 1 a.m. And since then, all of their texts and phone calls are not going through. The detective has Autumn and Jasmine sit down, talk about their friend. Autumn speaks first. She claims that Marayna is a, quote, sex worker, an affidavit I obtained for this case reports. I'm not going to call Marayna that, though it needs to be said this is how her friends referred to her, and that description is part of this story. Far as I could discern, Marayna may have dabbled in charging for companionship and maybe even sex, but in no way do I see that sex work was her way of life. It's clear she went out to Vegas with a friend to hang out and party. And even if it had been her chosen way of making a living, her life and choices play no part in her being the potential victim of a crime or the fact that she is missing. And I want to commend these two Vegas detectives taking this initial report. To their credit, they do not judge or place this report under any sort of prejudicial light. They listen to Marayna's friends and begin an investigation, and that is how it should be done. Marayna Rodgers, in contrast to how her friends described her, led an extraordinary life. She is a surgical nurse. She had lived in Los Angeles at one time before moving back home to Lakewood, Washington. Looking at her social media profiles, Marayna could have easily worked as a model. This is clear from the plethora of photos she posts. Her beauty and grace is unmistakably obvious. Her absolute understanding of fashion and makeup, the way in which she posed for photos, all spoke to Marayna's confidence and humility, with the idea being that one could be humble and beautiful and display it all in a way those who knew her would be proud of. Yet, despite her easy access to modeling scouts and agents, Marayna chose healthcare, a public service. Not long before heading out to Vegas, she had graduated from college, earning her nursing degree. Helping people was important to Marayna. This did not surprise those who knew her, nor did the fact that Marayna had been a member of the National Honor Society, Student Council, debate, and basketball teams at Lincoln High School in Seattle, Washington. But here are two of her friends sitting inside the Las Vegas PD, explaining to a detective taking the missing person report that she was out on a, quote, date the previous night, and it was the last time they had spoken to her. And unlike any other time Marayna went out, she has since failed to contact them. And Marayna was someone who always checked in. They had this friendly code among them. You went out, and then you checked in with your friends after the date. When you didn't, something was wrong. Autumn explains that although they had heard from Marayna at about 1 a.m., she and Jasmine last saw Marayna at about 8 p.m. on December 6th. She was leaving to go meet another woman they all knew fairly well, 19-year-old Sakari Harnden, who is a known sex worker living in Vegas. Autumn says she heard from someone else that Sakari set up a planned double date with two unknown males for her and Marayna. It's no secret Vegas can be a dangerous place for a woman out on the strip, working in casinos, just walking about town, or presenting herself available online. Serial killers frolic in places such as Vegas, as well as other major cities where scores of people travel in and out of town on a daily basis from all over the world. Gambling and casinos, of course, bring in a certain element of people. Christopher Wilder was a known Vegas serial killer back in the 80s. Wilder, a real estate investor and race car driver from Florida, moved to the U.S. from Australia in the late 60s and had a history of violent crimes, all of which had a sexual element connected to them. Sam Little, who we now know could have killed as many as 90 women, admitted to murdering sex workers in Vegas and drawing crude pictures of the women he killed. Carol Edward Cole, who murdered 12 people, was convicted of killing 2 women in Vegas. Thomas Crump is another. He murdered a sex worker in Vegas in 1980. My point with naming all of these vicious serial killers is that many of these psychopaths were simply passing through Vegas, same as a lot of violent transients do at one point or another. So when a pair of females walk into the Las Vegas PD and report that their friend went out on a date the previous night and has not been heard from since, if I am a detective, I have to go there in my investigative mind and consider the possibility. The conditions and scene in Vegas are conducive to a serial killer stalking, abducting, and murdering vulnerable women with a sort of ease he wouldn't find in a lot of other cities. At one point while this detective is taking Autumn and Jasmine's statement, Jasmine expresses how concerned she is for Marayna hanging out with Sakari Harnden. So the detective asks why. She says the people that Sakari hang around with are known to be dangerous and violent. They then tell this detective that Marayna is renting a local Airbnb and she drives a white 4-door Mercedes. After taking down some additional information, the detective tells Autumn and Jasmine they will look into it immediately. They have a good place to start. Sakari Harnden. Strangely enough, as detectives begin to look into Marayna's case, they get a piece of information that causes them great concern. Earlier that same afternoon of December 6th, at 2:25 p.m., Sakari Harnden, the same woman Marayna's friends said she had left with that night, also filed a missing person report, naming Marayna as someone she knew very well and has not been seen or heard from. So about 6 hours before Marayna's friends claimed they had last spoken to her, Sakari had already reported her missing. Something felt sketchy, at the least, about the entire situation, detectives surmise immediately. And as they begin talking to other people connected to Marayna and Sakari, well, things go from bad to worse quite quickly. When we return, I'll get into what happens next. And please, if you haven't, subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. And if you're a fan of my other podcast, Paper Ghosts, I'm going to be bringing you a few multi-part, more investigative cases here on Crossing the Line in the near future. Be right back. Las Vegas PD investigators believe that missing person report Sakari Harnden filed on December 6th at 2:25 p.m. is something they need to look into further. In fact, the cop who took the report wrote a note in the file explaining that the details Sakari offered to investigators were extremely vague. Something is wrong. The timeline here is not adding up. Detectives spread out and begin searching for Marayna at the usual haunts she might be hanging around. But everywhere they look, everyone they speak to, nothing in the form of a lead is uncovered. So they decide to do what is generally the first line of inquiry in these situations, a Kelsey phone ping. an electronic search for the GPS coordinates of the missing person's phone. That search yields no results. It does give them an important piece of information. Marayna's phone was either deactivated or turned off, which they find odd for someone so young, so active on social media, and in Vegas, far away from home. The following morning, a patrol officer spots a vehicle fitting the description of Marayna's white Mercedes. There's a man driving it, so the cop pulls the dude over. The guy says he's Marayna's boyfriend, and he and Marayna had driven to Vegas from Washington State on December 1st so Marayna could, quote, work. Marayna is not with him, so they bring him in. The boyfriend explains that he hasn't heard from Marayna since December 5th, late into the night. He claims Marayna met up with Sakari on that night, and they were set up to go out on a double date with two minor league NBA players in town for a game. Marayna was charging the guy she was meeting that night $4,000 to hang out with him, and he agreed to pay her fee. She left the Airbnb at 10:30 p.m. He expected her to be back by 9 a.m. the following morning, December 6th, but she never returned, never called, never texted. He says, quote, I tried to locate her via a location sharing app, but it appears she has her location services turned off or disabled. So they questioned the boyfriend further, figuring out quickly that what he is telling them seems to line up with the information they already have. The boyfriend then goes into more detail about the alleged double date. He says he heard earlier that day that Sakari and Marayna were seen riding around town with one of those minor league NBA players, partying, having fun, and that Marayna eventually grabbed an Uber and headed off to meet the second NBA player. The boyfriend thought the story, which he says came from Sakari, the young woman Marayna was with, sounded very much out of character for Marayna and didn't add up because Marayna always used her boyfriend's Uber account, and nothing had shown up on that Uber account. Marayna, he explains further, did not have her own Uber account. Detectives asked the boyfriend if he had anything else he thought might be important. He does. On December 4th, he says, Marayna and Sakari had a heated confrontation about Sakari apparently implicating her boyfriend in a double murder that took place in California some time ago. Sakari was enraged that Marayna had told other people it was Sakari who had turned in her ex-boyfriend. The guy they were talking about, a quick Las Vegas PD search indicated, was in custody in California under murder charges. So that story felt like it could be true. Before the interview ends, the boyfriend gives detectives the name of the guy he believed Marayna had ducked out to meet while she was with Sakari and that second NBA player. On December 7, the guy who allegedly met up with Marayna later on into the night is located and interviewed. He says he's known Marayna about 15 years. They were childhood friends. He had come to Vegas with Marayna and her boyfriend on December 1st and was staying with them at the Airbnb. He says he is not a minor league NBA player. They ask if he's seen Marayna recently. He says he drove Marayna to meet up with Sakari on the night everyone had last seen her and knew nothing about Marayna ducking out of the date and taking an Uber to meet him or any other man. All of which meant what? Sakari Harnden is lying. The question is, why? He mentions how he had dropped Marayna off on December 6th at 1 a.m. at a location just outside the Strip, and Sakari was there waiting for Marayna. Sakari also drives a Mercedes. There was another person, a large man, in the back seat of the vehicle, he says. He even looked inside the car and noticed several suitcases in the back seat, as if one of them was packed to go somewhere. Who's that guy? Marayna's friend asked Sakari, looking into her vehicle. Sakari answers back and calls the guy a trick. The friend thought it was odd, he tells investigators, that Sakari would have picked up a trick and had him sit in the back seat of the vehicle as she met with Marayna. Detectives wonder if that's it. He says he has one more thing. If Marayna is missing, Sakari is responsible. They realize they need to interview Sakari Harnden, a formal interview under Miranda caution. Her stories to two different people now and the Las Vegas police are not lining up. Sakari has this rough look about her, that street girl exterior. She's seen some hard times, no doubt about it. Immediately, she says that a dude she knows, Chance Comanche, was the guy in her car that night when Marayna's friend dropped her off. He's in love with me, Sakari adds, oddly, kind of randomly. He'd do anything for me. They ask Sakari if Comanche was a trick, or was he her boyfriend? Her brother? Who the hell is this guy? Chance plays in the NBA's G League, she explains, the minor leagues for basketballers. He plays for the Stockton Kings, the minor league affiliate of the NBA's Sacramento Kings. He is in town for a few games. Yes, she admits, he pays her for sex and to party, but they've known each other for years and had once even dated. From there, Sakari's story becomes a bit more convoluted. She says that she and Marayna dropped Chance Comanche off at a convenience store, and then she and Marayna drove off to meet another guy. Hung out with him for a bit. Then she asked Marayna if she wanted to go over to Chance Comanche's hotel room and party, hang out for the rest of the night. According to her, Marayna said no, she couldn't. She was busy meeting someone else later that night. Quote, and then she got into a black sedan Uber and took off. That was the last time Sakari says she saw Marayna. Did you and Marayna have any altercation recently? Detectives ask her. Sakari plays it off as if, yeah, they spoke recently about something, but it was in no way heated and so insignificant that she really couldn't even recall what they were talking about. She then shows detectives a screenshot of a text from Marayna's phone. It's from the guy who was hoping to hang out with Marayna on that night. That's the guy she took off with in the Uber to meet, Sakari explains, handing her phone to detectives. They didn't ask Sakari why she had the screenshot, which is a bit convenient and telling. What did you do the rest of that night? They asked Sakari. She explains that she went over to Chance Comanche's hotel room and hung out with him all night into the following morning. I tried contacting Marayna several times, but haven't made contact, and my messages haven't gone through. As Sakari is leaving the Las Vegas PD, both investigators are now working under the assumption that Sakari Harnden is lying. The entire story is fragile and crumbles as each word comes out of her mouth. And it appears from what they now learned that Sakari and this wannabe NBA dude, Chance Comanche, were the last two people to see Marayna. That gut feeling, along with the sketchy stories Sakari is telling and the fact that she reported Marayna missing, if you recall from earlier in the episode, before Marayna was actually missing, is enough to obtain 2 search warrants, one for Sakari's vehicle and another for any devices they find in that vehicle. They also need to interview Chance Comanche, the wannabe NBA baller. Part of the warrant includes the texting app used by the alleged man who had sent that text to Marayna, the one Sakari had the screenshot of. When computer forensics come back on that texting app number, they find out the number is registered to, no surprise, Chance Comanche. He is the man Marayna was allegedly meeting. There was no Uber pickup, no second NBA dude. Those were lies. When Marayna's friend dropped her off that night to meet Sakari and looked inside the car, the man in the back seat was Chance Comanche. So the question is, why would Sakari lie about this? Investigators, of course, know there is likely only one reason. Chance met Sakari on a dating app in mid-2021, and the two began a relationship. They dated for about 2 months, broke up, but remained in contact and saw each other anytime Comanche was in Vegas. Between that time and December 2023, Sakari had been complaining to Comanche about all the issues she was having with Marayna. Several of Sakari's friends had been saying Marayna was telling them that she, Marayna, was planning to, quote, smoke Sakari if she didn't hand over a Rolex watch Sakari had that Marayna wanted back. The implication being that Sakari had stolen it from Marayna. Further infuriating Sakari was that Marayna would buy the same clothes and jewelry as Sakari. So there was, we could say, this rivalry and dislike between them, for sure. Then they start searching through Sakari's phone, which they had gotten in that search of her vehicle. And this is when things become very, very dark. From late November into early December, Sakari and Chance were talking about Marayna. Chance doesn't even know Marayna at this point, but he is texting Sakari, asking her for all of Marayna's social media information so he can look her up. Text after text includes both of them dissing Marayna and hating on her. The texts read like junior high kids talking about a classmate. Then on December 1st, the conversation turns from junior high nonsense to a plan that is very sinister. Sakari sends Chance a text telling him to tell his guy to get a WhatsApp account and he can meet Marayna through that app. By his guy, Sakari and Chance Comanche are talking about someone Chance knows that they can hire to kill Marayna. Quote, "I'ma just pretend he's a trick and have her pull up and get it done like that," Sakari texts. Sakari is admitting in this text that she is bringing Marayna to the man that she and Chance Comanche have contracted to kill her. This is now a murder for hire case, a capital felony, I should add, punishable in any state by the death penalty. The problem with this plan, though, is that the guy they approach is not responding to Comanche's texts. And Sakari and Comanche by December 2nd begin losing their patience. It's clear in reading the texts between them during this time that Sakari is the driving force behind this murder. Yet Comanche has no problem playing along, doing her bidding, searching for someone to get the job done. Comanche then starts looking for an alternative hitman, someone else they can hire. Then they discuss a ghost gun they will provide their hired killer, which is an unregistered weapon built from unregistered part kits anyone can put together themselves or buy from someone who makes them. They have no serial numbers that can be traced because they are not sold from a manufacturer. By December 4th, it's clear to Sakari nobody is willing to help them, quote, get it done. Sakari texts late into that day, "Need to get that bitch drunk and mix rat poison or something in her drink." Comanche sends back 100% emoji. Then Sakari adds, "OD her ass. It's hella ways to off a MF," adding, "I can snap her neck or just strangle the bitch." Next, they discuss strangling Marayna with a length of rope in the back seat of Sakari's vehicle. This plan to murder Marayna goes on and on. Sakari is entirely playing on the fact, using it to her advantage, that Comanche is in love with her. She says at one point, "You're my twin. You'll learn one day." By December 5th, Sakari and Comanche had ditched the hitman plan and made the decision to murder Marayna themselves. So Sakari begins setting up how they would lure Marayna into a trap. All of this, I will say, is right there on the texting app. An entire plan, word for word, to murder Marayna. The day after they decide to carry out the murder themselves, December 6th, Sakari is texting Comanche, talking about how she had gone into the Las Vegas Police Department and spoken to cops about Marayna being missing, adding, quote, "My acting skills are beyond superb." Oh yeah, Sakari, you absolutely fooled those seasoned Las Vegas Police Department detectives. Right. What happened between the time they discussed the murder via those texts and Sakari going into the Las Vegas PD to report her missing is what detectives want to know. And just think about this for a minute. These two idiots decide to murder a young woman because she allegedly talked shit about Sakari and wanted her watch back. The devaluation some people have placed on human life is remarkable to me still. Even after all these years in true crime, all these cases I have covered. I need to take one more short break, but when I return, I'll get into what happened and how these two clowns, who should be up for the Stupidest Killer Couple of the Year award, are caught. If you want to find me on social media, where you can see videos of the cases I cover on CTL, search for @MWilliamPhelps, and you'll see me on the Facebook, the X, the Twitter, the TikTok, whatever. Be right back. "6'10" tall, Chance Comanche was 27 years old in December 2023 as this murder plot he fueled was designed and carried out. He grew up in California and graduated from Beverly Hills High School in 2015 before attending a rather poshy prep school for a year. In high school and later, after attending the University of Arizona and playing for the basketball team, it was clear Comanche was not going to be a standout player destined for NBA greatness. He averaged 5 points a game in Arizona. Still, after just 2 years in college, he decides to enter himself into the NBA draft. Except that no NBA team saw the potential he saw in himself, and he was not selected. He wasn't even invited to the NBA Summer League, which talent on the cusp of being drafted sometimes is. This had to be a blow to his enormous ego. Cut his ass right down. You are not good enough, dude. Simple as that. From there, however, Comanche joins the Memphis Hustle, another NBA minor league team, and then bounces around to different teams for a time before a stint in a Turkish league. He does well in Turkey, comes back to the U.S., and signs on with the Stockton Kings, makes it onto the roster of the NBA's Portland Trail Blazers. Ooh, exciting. He plays one NBA game before being cut from the team. The guy just didn't have the goods to make it in the NBA, and he wasn't seeing it. So he crawls back to the Stockton Kings, and they take him. By the time the Las Vegas PD know that Sakari and Comanche are responsible for Marayna's disappearance and likely murder, they uncover a bit of surveillance footage showing Sakari and Marayna walking in and out of a liquor store together on the night Marayna went missing. This further implicates Sakari in knowing where Marayna was most of that night. Between the phone records and electronic computer forensics, the new footage, and obvious lies Sakari has told police, along with those damning text messages, 2 arrest warrants are signed and executed. With conspiracy, kidnapping, and a murder for hire angle involved, the case is strong enough for a death penalty charge. That is, if they can find Marayna's body. On December 14, Stockton, California County Sheriff's Office, Major Crimes Division, picks Chance Comanche up. He had returned to California with the Kings on December 7th after they played their last game in town. In fact, several of the texts he'd sent to Sakari discussing the murder of Marayna were sent during that last game he played in Vegas and even on the tarmac of the airport later. So, not the smartest guy in the room. They arrest Comanche as he is practicing with the Stockton Kings in California and take him into custody on kidnapping charges. As that is happening, 2 detectives from the Las Vegas PD head out to California to interview him. You might be wondering how these two thought they could possibly get away with this. There's definitely a certain amount of hubris involved, but more so, it's the cold nature of the sociopath that takes over, which fools them into thinking they are smarter than cops and even technology. It's an uncontrollable impulse to believe the grandiosities inside their heads. This is what's really brewing in them. And when you put two of them together, as we see here with Sakari and Chance, it's like their personality disorders are on steroids. Here are two people who know right from wrong, but are showing absolutely no regard for it. The dishonesty, manipulation, aggression, deceit, it's as if nothing else matters but what they want. The reality is today that it's almost impossible to get away with murder. Most people understand this, but these two knuckleheads, within their grandiose visions of themselves, believe they will be the ones who slip by and get away. As soon as Chance Comanche is sitting in a closed-off room, two Las Vegas PD detectives in his face across the table, what do you think he does? He caves, like a teenager caught stealing a pack of cigarettes. He gives it all up. This is because between the two of them, Comanche is the follower, the weaker of the two. Sakari knew he loved her and that he might have even been obsessed with her and would have done whatever she asked. But when the gig is up, Comanche comes down off the cloud and understands immediately what the stakes are. He doesn't even try to outsmart them or lie, most likely understanding that the first one in this situation to take a deal is going to get the best deal. This is a brutal, premeditated, long thought out, not so well planned, vindictive murder, pushed and scripted by Sakari, Harnden, and Chance Comanche. Remember, Comanche had never met Marayna before that night, and yet there he is, in the back seat of Sakari's car, with Marayna in the front seat, Sakari driving, ready and willing to commit murder for his sex worker ex-girlfriend, and likely believed this murder would bond them together forever. As he begins talking about what happened, detectives are stunned by how callous and cold the plan actually is. Early that night, Sakari tells Marayna that Comanche wants to have sex with both of them together and will pay a lot of money. But he wants the sex to be kinky. That's the setup. Sakari's original plan had been to take Marayna to a friend's house who was away, but she had found out that day the friend moved. So she reverts to plan B. After going into that liquor store and telling Marayna what Comanche wants, Sakari drives and finds a suburban cul-de-sac in Henderson, about 20 minutes south of Vegas. In the back seat, Comanche sits with his luggage, ready to head back home the morning after the murder. After Sakari parks the car, she and Marayna get undressed, and Sakari hops on top of Marayna, straddling her lap. Now, Sakari is looking directly in the back seat at Comanche. Then they begin playing the part, Marayna believing this is what Comanche is paying for. Comanche then hands Sakari a few zip ties. Marayna doesn't think much of this because she had been told Comanche wants kinky sex, and so she puts her wrists together and allows Sakari to bind her hands. Sakari then places her hands around Marayna's shoulders, around the headrest of the seat, and into the back seat, as if her hands are going to be bound as well. Marayna cannot see Comanche, who is sitting behind the front seat where Sakari is straddling Marayna. In his hands, Comanche has one of those common HDMI cords we all have, and he places it over Marayna's head and around her neck. Quote, "When she began struggling to breathe, I stopped. This was about 10 seconds. Then," he says, "I bitched out," meaning he couldn't go through with it. I'm not so sure I believe this, because murderers in this situation, they always downplay their role. By now, Sakari, whose hands were never bound, has Marayna by the neck and is strangling her, according to Comanche's statement. Remember, Marayna's hands are bound. She is defenseless. She cannot do anything. Sakari chokes Marayna to death as Comanche looks on. Then they drive around for a time with Marayna's dead body in the car, looking for a place to bury her. They find a spot in Henderson in the desert among some hilly terrain with a lot of rocks, place Marayna's body in a ditch, and then cover it with rocks. Detectives bring Comanche a map and tell him to point out exactly where she is. They bring canines out to the location, and within a few hours, they recover Marayna's body. Additional video surveillance footage, this time from Comanche's hotel, shows Sakari and Comanche returning to his hotel room at 6 a.m. Then Comanche leaving the room about 9 a.m., with Sakari leaving about 90 minutes later, quote, visibly upset and crying. You know, I can't help but to note that Sakari Harnden's booking photo has this childlike quality about it. She comes across so young. I mean, she's only 19. You have to wonder what drove her not only into a world of sex work, but using murder as an act of revenge against someone she obviously didn't like and developed an explosive rage for. It's too early into this case to know much about her background, but it will all eventually come out. Sakari and Comanche were indicted in March 2024, charged with a host of violent crimes, from murder to first-degree kidnapping with the use of a deadly weapon. They will be found guilty, there is no doubt, if they decide to go to trial. The evidence is overwhelming, and by now I am certain there is plenty of forensics, DNA, etc., to back up Chance Comanche's story. Sakari has not said much as of April 2024. In the only court appearance she made, Sakari seemed oblivious to the reality of what she'd allegedly done, nervously smiling and seemingly unaffected by the gravity of the situation. I don't think this was an intentional taunt more than it was a teenager trying to come to grips with having committed such a calculating act of extreme violence in response to a situation most face without complication. And I'll say this. There's no way that Sakari Harnden can come forward and say, look, Chance Comanche put me up to this. I was talking about how angry I was with Marayna, and he convinced me to kill her. The text exchanges between them tell the story. The attorney representing Marayna Rodgers' family released a statement saying, in part, "We are devastated that she will never come home. Marayna was kind and compassionate. We are grateful to the law enforcement agencies to seek justice for Marayna and our family." If you like what we do here, please tell a friend, post something about us on social media, or write us a great review wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps. Visit crossingtheline.biz to get hold of me or suggest cases. Check out my other podcast, Paper Ghost, now in its 4th season from iHeartMedia. But please, beyond and more importantly than all of that, be safe, be aware. Sources for today's episode: Las Vegas PD warrant declaration and summons, December 17, 2023. Various Associated Press reports, the court dates, and the lawyer's statement you heard at the end. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell.